Hello, and welcome to Entrepreneur Series with me, Elizabeth Gitao. This is our second episode. If you are new, kindly subscribe, like, share, and let us know what you think. So, from our last episode, I had told you about how I got this job, and it fell short of my ideal job. But now it's 1 year. It's 6 months, 1 year, 1.5, and I have not been able to secure another job. And now I have having so much free time. I'm on the internet, and I started seeing issues to do with domestic workers, and that is how now the desire or the interest to work with domestic workers, started getting nurtured. And I started nurturing it by, I started reading articles on domestic workers. I started checking out people who are doing the same thing that I was doing. And I remember how I would wake up and I would see a very beautiful article about this person who is doing this with domestic workers, training them, giving them jobs. And I was like, oh, someone is already doing it, so the problem has been solved. And my friend Naomi, a colleague then, would tell me, Liza chujinga, hizi solve shida ya watu wote, na you have something that you can always give. And I thank you, Naomi, wherever you are. Please nitafute tukunywe kachai. So Naomi is one of the people that were really pushing me to do something about, because I kept telling her about what I think, my vision, the entity that I was thinking about. But regardless of the dissatisfaction that I was going through, I was not quitting. I was not writing that resignation letter, because let me tell you guys, if you're watching this and probably you're employed and you're thinking of quitting, it's not easy. It's not a decision that you wake up and you're like, shoo. Yes, you have to really have a trigger, be triggered to do that. And my trigger was on the way. So guys, how I got to resign is I was in charge of accounts payables, and at one point, what that tells you is that I used to write checks, pay people. I used to be in custody of some petty cash. I paid salaries. So one time there was money that was missing in the bank, and before that money got lost, there was a check that had been presented to the bank, and the bank called the chief accountant, who called me to inquire whether I had written that check. And unfortunately, I had not written that check. So I reported back to him, and he never told me what had happened with that check leaf, because when I went to check, it was check number like 90s, and I was at check number 70s, in the order of how I was writing them. So he never told me anything about it, and I never bothered to ask how the check had gotten its way to the bank. So when I got a missing check, we used to share an office space with another guy. So I told him, hey, is it possible for a bank to miss a leaf, like the check leaves, I miss numbers in moja kwa haijakwa? And we were like, no, because we know that a check is money, so there's no way they would miss. And I was like, I'm a bank inaanza ukora, you're just thinking and you're talking. But I told him, let me go and report, and then the chief accountant can advise. And I remember when I was at the door, he called me. He used to call me Liz, unakumbuka kuna check kingine? And then he reminded me about that check that had been presented, and then they never told me. Nikamwambia, but they never told me. So then he suggested, and was like, na sasa they already knew before you got to know about it. Probably they know even about this one. And I was like, by the way, worst mistake ever. So I never reported. So along the way now, I kept missing checks. And then I missed like around 4. And unfortunately, or kuna ujinga yangu, I never reported until end month now, when now I was the one who was writing the check. So I would prepare the payment vouchers, and now the payment vouchers, I would hand them over to the guy who was doing reconciliation, now the guy we used to share space with. And so he would get now the bank statement, anza kufanya reconciliation. Akifanya reconciliation, kwa bank pesa imetoka kutoka, like it was around 1 point something cumulatively, because it was not from one account, it was like from this bank account, that bank account, for that company, that bank account. So he was like, Liz, iko wapi payment voucher check fulani? I'm like, I go to my record. I used to record, to keep my own record of the checks that I have written, to whom, the amount, and the status has been signed, and dispatch hasn't been picked, and who has picked them. So now I check and it's a missing check. Then he asked for another one. I check and it's a missing check. 4 of them, 1.3. Around 1.3 or 1 point something. I don't remember very well the figure. Where? So at that moment, it's still not as serious. Until now, I tell him, go and report to the chief accountant that if he's the one who wrote, he will advise. He goes to the chief accountant, and the chief accountant says, no, I have not written. So he called me and he told me, that record you keep, get me a printout and come with it to the office. I did that. He went. He was like, Elizabeth, because now I had written missing. So he was like, you mean you missed all these checks and you never reported? I was like, I thought you were the one who has written. You thought? Now it became my fault, like completely. And I was like, and now he couldn't solve it, so he took it ahead. Now the matter has escalated. Tukajipata kwa red carpet. I used to call it red carpet because his office, the MD's office, was red carpeted. And the questioning began. Where I have never been grilled like I was on that day. And he asks me, Elizabeth, do you know that check is money? And I'm like, yeah, I know. And you missed a check and you never. Do you know that can count as professional negligence? When he mentioned professional negligence, I was like, I am done. My career is doomed. And I remember the questioning continued, and I kept defending myself until I got at one point where I'm defending myself, and ni kama hawasikii, they still want me to tell them where the money is or why I didn't say. So I remember I told them, I am sorry that I didn't report the missing checks, but that is where my fault ends. I have nothing to do with the missing money. And I said it with a lot of finality that even they couldn't continue with the questioning. So they were like, sawa, endo ngoja hapo nje. So we waited, and then the chief accountant left the office. Wakaniambia endeni mfanye kazi. So we continued working, but this point, this whole scandal was really like the trigger, because I felt like no, siwezi kuwa suspect wa wizi, and the way I hold myself on, standards zangu there's some values and principles that I can't compromise on, and one of them is that I can't steal. So now to be associated with this, it was it was so heartbreaking. So this is what led me to resign. I was like, na nikaresign niende nianze ile kitu mimi ushinda nikifikiria, or what I always talk about. And so I went ahead. I think the whole thing happened in the month of January 2015, and on that 1st of January I tendered my resignation, and I had given them 3 months notice, as I had been required to do from the contract had indicated that I need to give 3 months notice. So I remember when the chief accountant now took the letter to the MD, and he called me and he was like, I am saying this, and I was like, yeah, I have resigned and I'll leave after 3 months. And he smiled in a very cheeky manner, like, okay. So I could see, like, in his mind he was thinking, so this girl has taken our money and he thinks he will go with it. And he was like, sawa. So I went back and I continued with my work. Now this time I'm orientating someone. I was teaching someone who now mwenye nitaachia. Yeah. So after like 2 months, we had already known who the culprit was. Imagine, it was the guy that I shared an office with. That guy, God, I should get to see him. I will tell you how he went and said that ni mimi nilimuthreaten. So now, after they got to know who the culprit is, the MD called me and told me, that was like around 2 weeks to the lapse of my notice. He told me, now we have gotten to know who did this, so if this is the reason why you are leaving, then I don't think you have a reason to leave. And I was like, yeah, that was the reason initially, but right now, hey, in the 3 months I had psyched myself how I will start my business, and the entity that I was seeing in mind, hey, it was beautiful and big. So I started telling him my plans. I'm planning to go and start a training center for domestic workers where I place them with employers. Hey, I shared information, and he looked at me and was like, unataka kwenda kukua kama bureau? And I'm like, at that point, I didn't even know about bureaus, because remember, I was born in the village. Hakukuwa na house girl. I didn't even know kuna kitu nitangwa bureau where people go to get DM. So I was approaching it from a totally, how do I call it? Like, my approach was from theoretical, like the actual practical part I had no idea. Then akaniambia na sisi zinafanyangwa na mama wa salon wa vibanda, so nataka kwenda kukua hustler. And I defended my idea. But now he started making sense, because he told me, you see, when you're starting a business right now, you've not even worked, you have not even saved. Remember my salary, right? So you need to work, then you have gotten like a saving that can run your company for a number of months before you start. And then he shared how he started, how it was not easy. And it started now making sense to me, because I didn't have savings, but I needed a lot of money to go and start. And so I was like, okay, ni sawa, but now with the kind of salary that you're paying me, how will I even save and start my business? And he was like, mshahara, that one we can always discuss. And I was like, hey, bring it on. But he told me, but before we discuss that, let me make consultations. And after like 2 days, he calls me and tells me, after making some consultations to Leona, we were in April, let's close the year. The financial year in the company used to end in June. So let's close the financial year to jua venye tumefanya. And then as we review your colleagues' salaries, we will also review yours, so that we don't set a precedent that watu wakitaka kuongezwa mshahara, they will resign. Like it's like they're blackmailing them by resign. So it made sense for them, but it didn't make sense for me, because I was ready to discuss figures. And at that moment, if we would have discussed figures and then I was saying effective July, then it would have made sense for me. But it was not making sense for me. How they had thought that this is going to convince me, I don't know. So I told him, no, if that is the case, then let me go ahead and complete my notice and serve my notice, and then I go. And he didn't even respond, he just told me, that is fine. And I went to my desk, nikikatu hivi, come for your letter. The secretary, I went, and now the letter I got is they have accepted my resignation. That is the moment that it sank. Like, Elizabeth, you are now on your own. That idea that you're thinking about, it better work, or hautakuwa na chakula ya kukula. And guys, that is how my job, my employment journey ended. And I left on the 30th of April 2015 to go and start my company. And now let's meet next week as I tell you how the journey of entrepreneurship began. Thank you so much. This is Entrepreneur Series with me, Elizabeth Gitau, where we dream it, believe it, work it, and enjoy it. Thank you so much, guys.